Let's move on to our awards. So at the end of the season, the big question is who's player of the year, who's team of the year, who's coach of the year, what was the big surprise of the year? Let's start with player of the year. In your eyes, who was the player of the year in Northeast Indiana? I know we had a lot of great quarterbacks.
We did.
One of them led the state in passing.
Yeah, another one was second in the state in passing.
One was second in the state in passing, and that doesn't even count in Jeffrey Becker and Deuce Taylor.
Right.
So where do you go? Because I think there's a lot of rationale you could use for this.
You absolutely could. So, some of the best players in the area didn't go very far in the postseason. And was that their fault? I don't think so in a lot of ways. But I feel like in the end, you have to go with players that made plays when it counted enough to advance their team deep in the postseason. And I got to go with James Arnold, just with how he led this team for 2 years at the quarterback spot, made play after play after play. He had a lot of help around him, no doubt, but he had to be able to get the ball to those guys. He had to lead this group. And for him to be the Mental Attitude Award winner on Saturday, it just kind of talks to his composure and his ability as a person. I mean, he's a valedictorian for South Adams, #1 in the class. He's got a 4.0 GPA. So he's a success even off the field, but you have to give the kid credit. Shattered all the offensive records at South Adams, even as a junior. Just put the top on it as a senior. And for me, he's my player of the year for a special year for the Starfires.
Yeah, threw for 3,938 yards. That's first in the state this year. That's tied for 8th all time. Single season.
Crazy.
The only person in Northeast Indiana history that's ever thrown for more was Peter Morrison when he had that fantastic senior year for Concordia. So a historic season for James Arnold. I was going to go with James Arnold as well. I don't envy the folks that put together the Ewell Wilson Award winner, because I think deciding between Deuce Taylor and deciding between Jeffrey Becker is really going to be tough. And that's a no-win situation because somebody's going to be I guess you could split it. There you go, but and then you can make arguments for other guys.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean Cowan. I think you can. Demarius Cowan. I think for a kid that didn't go very far in the postseason, but then you look at his stats and he's putting up numbers against everybody that Northrop played. I mean, is it his fault that the Bruins didn't advance further? No. Was he the best running back in the area? I think so. I mean, was he the best player all around in the area? You can make that case. Like you said, very different rationales you can take on who you pick. It's tough to say one of 5 or 6 guys couldn't be it, depending on how you rationalize it.
Yeah, and you look at, offensive linemen, they don't get a lot of love, but, Mr. Fiacable out of Bishop Dwenger did it on both sides of the football.
I mean, Rowan Zolman with East Noble.
I was going to say Rowan Zolman because they were a different team when he wasn't in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he was the straw that stirred the drink at East Noble. So Eli Riley had a fantastic season on both sides. I mean, there's just a number of guys that you could go through and make an argument too. But I also agree that James Arnold kind of stood a little bit above the rest this season. Team of the year. Who would you look at as your team of the year? Obviously, we had 2 teams go to state. It probably starts there in terms of discussion.
Right. I think you got to go with South Adams, just being able to fulfill their potential, something they fell short of last year, losing in the regional round. To face the amount of pressure that they face, not just from media members, but the community, kids in the school, just everybody around that program, and knowing what the expectations were and to live up to those expectations and execute week in and week out was just tremendous. And we've seen so many teams in the past not reach their potential with the amount of talent that they have. For South Adams to do it this year and bring together a community like Bern, it was special. I don't think there's any debate. South Adams Team of the Year.
Yeah, and Lures is right in that discussion as well. But South Adams, again, just sort of like James Arnold, just a little notch above because they were able to meet the high expectations or at least come close to them. I also had Homestead on my short list.
Sure.
Because you take a look at what they lost in graduation and then Luke Goody not playing football, you say, oh, man, they're going to take a big step back this year. They didn't. They lost their first game of the season. And then they went on to win the SAC championship for the second time in a row. So I would throw them up there with some of the teams getting consideration. But, yeah, again, South Adams just kind of a little bit of a notch above there. Coach of the Year, who do you think did the best job on the sidelines this year? And I had some unconventional thoughts on this one. I actually thought at the beginning of the year East Noble was going to take a tremendous step back.
Yeah.
They did not.
They did not, yeah.
They had a very solid season. Bailey Parker had graduated. Hayden Jones had graduated. They withstood some injuries at the quarterback position, and yet here we are at the end of the season. They had another good, solid football season. I got to give a lot of credit to Luke Amstutz for that.
I think you can go a bunch of different directions here. Luke Amstutz is a good one. I think Coach Zolman at Homestead is. You look at the guys that went to state, so Kyle Lindsey and Grant Mosier as well. But I'm going to go a little off the radar and go Matt Thacker of Fairfield.
Okay.
For 2 years ago, a winless season. They go and just get absolutely destroyed at Angola 2 years ago. Of course, that was a really good Angola team. So in the matter of 2 years, and even last year going 6-6, Coach Thacker puts together a team that was arguably the best team in the NECC, won their division championship. And for a team that you looked at and said that these are a lot of blue-collar football players, but no real studs out here, for them to outplay the teams that they played and beat up on Angola 2 years after getting destroyed, and just the team that Matt Thacker has built in such a short amount of time and what they did, they got drilled in the postseason, but in terms of looking at the regular season and how a team developed, I think there's no better performance over a 2-year period in terms of turning a program around than what Coach Thacker did.
That's a good point. I also had on my list Coach Gerber from Norwell.
Yes, absolutely.
Norwell
Almost the same situation.
Yeah, just a few years ago, they're not winning any football games, and much like Fairfield, they've turned it around in a hurry, and a lot of it had to do with playing the seniors from this season, starting as freshmen: Eli Riley, Max Ringer, Joel Rinkenberger. I mean, those guys. I mean, it seems like they're in their 7th year at Norwell,
know, right?
But you got to give credit where credit's due, and I think Josh Gerber deserves mention when it comes to Coach of the Year candidates. But a lot of great jobs done out there, and especially, this is a season where you had much more to deal with than just football on Friday nights. So for these guys to put it together and stand out, very impressive. Biggest surprise this football season. Positive, negative, I mean, you can go either way with this, but other than the fact that we're still playing football?
Yeah, that's the big one, right?
That's the biggest surprise and the biggest positive coming out of this season. What was your biggest surprise this season?
I really think the biggest surprise was Homestead going back-to-back in the SAC. Not taking anything away from what the Spartans did, but you felt, man, losing what they lost to graduation, losing their starting quarterback, and you have a new guy coming in Ormsby, and early in the season it looks a little shaky. They lose the first game of the season, and for them to come back and hold on to the victory bell for back-to-back seasons, a surprise for me. Maybe it shouldn't be a surprise, but for them to hold off Bishop DeWanger and all those teams, I think that's very impressive. But then on a negative side, I think you have to throw Snyder in there.
Yeah.
Just because we're so shocked anytime Snyder is not up there in the conversation for the best team in the SAC. We saw them take tremendous strides over the course of 10, 11 weeks in the season, but by and large, they were a non-factor midway through the year in the SAC. We're just not used to that. So they'll bounce back, played a lot of young kids, but I think in terms of surprises, I'm going Homestead on the positive, Snyder on the negative.
Yeah, I was going to say Snyder as well. Talked to Coach Tippmann a little bit down at State this past weekend. He's there with Indiana Football Coaches Association, and he was like, we weren't good to start the beginning of the season. But really, the second half of the season was a different story. They graduated 38 seniors off last year's squad. Yeah. Now they've got Dominic Moon, DJ Moore, Mr. Brown at the running back position. Those guys are going to be back. So I think, maybe next year we're going to talk about them as a surprise positive.
Yeah.
Because I think they're going to be really tough once the season starts next year, and they have a typical off season when they don't have to replace almost 40 dudes.
Yeah, no doubt.
And deal with coronavirus at the same time.
Right.
Secondly, I also thought Lures, man, we knew they had firepower, but just to post a 3-6 record and then to make it the state championship game, I got to give a lot of credit to Kyle Lindsey and what they were able to do out there. I was surprised. I thought Eastside, it was going to be Eastside's year, kind of along along South Adams' lines, and the fact that outside of Laban Davis, there was just a lot of seniors that had played a lot of football, and I felt like, once Lures beat them, I thought, ooh, Lures is a serious contender here, but I thought it was going to be Eastside season. If I had to pick at the beginning of the year, outside of South Adams, the second team that I thought would make the state finals, I would have picked Eastside.
Really?
I would have.
Yeah.
I would have. In Todd Mason, we trust.
Todd we trust, man.
But, impressive run from Bishop Lures, so I got to go there. A final question, just to kind of wrap up this season. How do you think we're going to remember this in the future? Because it was just so weird.
Yeah.
I don't have another word for it.
think
We never knew what was going to happen. I mean, games are getting canceled Wednesday, Thursday. People are picking up games. I mean, it was just weird. We didn't know, hey, if we're going to finish this season, what's going to happen? It was just a weird year. How do you think we'll remember this?
I just think the bizarre situations of no fans and limited fans and masks and all this stuff, I think we're just going to lump it in as part of 2020 when you look back. I think positive or negative, a lot of memories were made on the high school football field this year. And I think everybody that was involved in this season in whatever capacity is going to remember it going forward as just that crazy year where anything could happen. But, you know, we got through it. We completed the season. And I think that's a victory in itself for what we accomplished. And everybody involved, I think, is going to emerge from it as going forward as having some memories, probably some fond, some not so fond, but it'll definitely be a point of people looking back to remember this year.
All right, man. Appreciate you coming in
Absolutely.
every Monday. Appreciate the support from Optimum Performance Sports all season long. And, of course, well, we change and transition to basketball this coming Friday on the Highlight Zone, but that is going to put a wrap on the 2020 high school football season. I would normally shake your hand, but I'm trying to keep
we're good.
6 feet, 6 feet of social distance here, as with the mask. But, again, for Justin Kinney, I'm Glenn Marini. Thanks for watching every Monday here on Wayne.com, and we'll see you next season.